The knock on my office door was soft. Harmless. I didn't know it was the sound of my life ending. She stood there, calm, collected, and dropped the kind of accusation that doesn't just stain your name. It brands it into your skin. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She just looked me dead in the eye and lied. Within hours, my inbox exploded. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Friends stopped returning calls. My own family wouldn't look at me the same. And by the end of the week, I was unemployed, broke, and branded as something I'd never been. The police didn't care. The local court didn't care. The truth didn't matter. She had a story, and in a world that thrives on outrage, that was all it took. But here's what she didn't know: I'm not the kind of man who goes quietly. I started digging. I found cracks in her story so wide you could drive a truck through. And every time she thought she'd silenced me, I came back louder. By the time I was finished, her lies weren't just exposed, they were dissected, shredded, and hung out for the whole country to see. Because I didn't just prove my innocence. I dragged her case through every court in the land until it stood before the 9 justices themselves. She thought she'd ruin me. But I took her down in a way she'll never recover from, with her name in ruins, carved into history forever. The knock on my door wasn't frantic. It was polite. A polite knock is a trap, it tricks you into opening. I looked up from my screen. Tuesday, 9:41 a.m. The office smelled like burnt coffee and printer heat. I just hit send on a project I'd babysat for 3 months, the kind of deliverable that decides promotions and pay grades. I was already picturing the walk home, the stupid grin I'd wear, the burrito I'd reward myself with. Then, 3 gentle taps. "Come in," I said, still half smiling at my inbox. She slipped inside. Mara. Marketing liaison, blazer the color of cut steel, hair in a clean twist that said both "I have it together" and "I don't have time to reassure you that I have it together." We'd exchanged exactly 5 emails in 6 months. She closed the door softly and folded her hands like she was about to teach a class. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. I spun my chair. "Sure. Everything okay with the rollout?" Her mouth curved, not a smile. "I just spoke with HR. There's a tone people use when they're telling you the dog died." Mara had it now. A clinical sympathy, perfectly measured. I felt an ice-cold thread run from my throat down into my stomach. "What's this about?" I asked. She watched me the way surgeons look at monitors. "They'll explain. I thought I should give you a heads up." Heads up. Such a friendly phrase for a guillotine. "Okay," I said, standing, palms already sweating. "Let's go." HR lives at the far end of the carpet, past the open-plan fields of succulents and branded inspirational quotes. As we walked, heads popped up prairie dog style. I saw the little ripples of attention, the tiny storm tracks of curiosity. Someone whispered my name. Someone else turned to a friend, eyes wide. Reporters talk about scent in the air at crime scenes. That's what it felt like, an odorless panic you can still smell. They were waiting for me. The HR director, Janine, with her careful vowels and tidy printouts. A compliance guy I'd never met. And a man from legal who didn't give his last name. "Have a seat, Aaron," Janine said, using the voice they practice in trainings, the one that lays down pillows before it drops you. I sat. "What is this?" Janine folded her hands. "A report has been filed." Mara was gone. Of course she was. She'd only been the usher. "What kind of report?" I asked, though a part of me already knew because the room had shifted, somehow, like a church right after the priest says "Forgive me, Father." Janine spoke with the precision of someone threading needles. "Mara has alleged that on Friday evening, at the off-site mixer, you followed her to the parking garage and," she paused, as if stopping to calibrate her voice to the exact weight of the words, "and made unwanted sexual advances." For a second, everything in the room stepped away from me. The fluorescent lights hummed from very far off. I could feel my pulse trying to punch out through my wrists. "That's not possible," I said. "Calm. Too calm." I left at 9. I took a rideshare from the front entrance. I didn't even see her leave. Legal guy scribbled something. Janine nodded sympathetically, like I just told her I hadn't had my coffee yet. "We'll have the opportunity to review your account. In the meantime, we're placing you on administrative leave pending an investigation." "Wait." I leaned forward, palms on the table. "I can show you the receipt." The driver's name was Kamal. He picked me up at 9:12 p.m. on Spring Street. There are cameras. There were at least 30 people between me and the door. I swallowed back the sudden burn in my throat. I didn't do this. Janine slid a document toward me as if pushing a raft out onto a river. You'll have a chance to submit any evidence. For now, please refrain from contacting Mara or any colleagues in a manner that might be perceived as retaliatory. Retaliatory. A word that builds its own cage. I'm being suspended for something that didn't happen, I said. Administrative leave, Janine corrected gently. With pay. Like money could steady the floor. They asked for my badge, my laptop, my phone, the company one, not the personal. The compliance guy watched as I logged out. He looked embarrassed, as if he'd shown up to the wrong party wearing the wrong costume. When they walked me out, time did that trick where it forgets how to move. The corridor stretched into a bad dream. Faces appeared and vanished. Someone's Slack message pinged and made me flinch. I held my elbows the way you hold a coat in a storm. Outside, the day had the audacity to be beautiful. Sunlight glittered on 100 indifferent windows. I stood on the sidewalk with a cardboard box holding my desk plants and a framed photo of my sister's kids, and I realized my mouth was open. I'd been walking with my mouth open, like I'd just stepped from an explosion. My phone buzzed. Personal. A message from Tom, my manager, call me when you can. Followed immediately by another, actually, maybe not today. There it was, the pivot. The turn away. I could feel the ground tilt as people rearranged themselves into safe distances. I went home. I closed the blinds. I opened my laptop and pulled up my rideshare history with shaking hands. 9:12 p.m., the app said. Pick up, 550 Spring. Drop off, my apartment. I screenshotted it, emailed it to myself, CC'd a folder I titled Facts because I needed a word that sounded like a weapon. Then I watched my name appear online. It didn't show up in a headline, not yet. It trickled. A private Slack thread leaked to a private group chat which migrated to a private subreddit where anonymity makes courage cheap. Someone posted a blurred clip from the off-site, me laughing at something by the outdoor heaters. The caption, men like this always look harmless, don't they? A dozen comments sprouted beneath it like fungus. Protect Mara. Believe women. HR better not screw this up. The certainty was tidal. It rolled over me without even knowing I was there. I called my sister. She answered on the second ring, voice already worried. What happened? I told her. Not perfectly. I left out the part where my hands went numb in HR, the part where panic looks like politeness. It's a lie, I said. I can prove it. She was quiet for a beat. I believe you. 3 words like sandbags on a levee. Then, softer, but you need a lawyer. Already on it, I lied. After I hung up, I Googled until the sun moved, reading bios with phrases like white-collar defense and reputation management. Every face looked like it had seen this before. Every face looked tired. By evening, a statement went out company-wide. I know because someone forwarded it to me from an address I didn't recognize. It was the kind of statement lawyers write when they're trying to avoid both liability and human speech. We take all allegations seriously. We are conducting a thorough investigation. Our priority is the safety and well-being of our employees. My name wasn't in it, but it didn't need to be. Everyone knew who had left the building with a box. I sat at my kitchen table and made a list. When your life is on fire, you write lists. It makes the chaos look like bullet points. Pull rideshare logs, export location data. Email the bar manager security footage at front entrance, 8 to 10 p.m. Text Tom, what exactly did she say? Delete draft. Don't text Tom. Call 3 firms. Ask about defamation, employment law, criminal. Write everything down. Every minute. Every detail. At 10:34 p.m., I drafted an email to HR with my evidence and a request for the exact allegations, timestamps, and locations. I read it 5 times, turned down the heat of the adjectives, deleted a sentence that started with I can't believe. Send. I paced. I stared at the ceiling. I replayed Friday night like a film, frame by frame. I remembered the bartender with the sleeve tattoo. The playlist that kept skipping. I remembered signing a congratulations card for someone's baby, the ink had smeared. I remembered offering Mara my spot in the food truck line because she looked like she wanted to leave. She'd said, thanks, without meeting my eyes. That was it. That was every moment of my entire interaction with her. So why me? The question sat in the room like a fourth chair. I wanted to throw it through a window. I wanted to take a time machine 36 hours backward and stand by the heaters with my arms crossed and my mouth shut and my badge beneath a different name. My email pinged. HR, we acknowledge receipt. Please refrain from further contact with the reporting party or potential witnesses. No answers. A wall with a slot for my letters. Around midnight I opened my front door because I needed to hear proof that the world still existed. The hallway smelled like someone else's dinner. A light buzzed on a timer. Distant, a couple argued kindly about a movie ending. Life continued to be life, indifferent to the fact that mine had split. I didn't sleep. At 3:07 a.m., I thought of something and sat up so fast my back spasmed. The garage cameras. Not the front door, the parking garage. If Mara was saying I followed her into the garage, then the feed would show her going down the elevator without me. It would show me, where? On Spring Street, stepping into the rideshare. 2 truths in one set of pixels. I wrote another list. Property management, locate building security contact. Subpoena? Ask lawyer. Preserve footage before it's overwritten. At 6:11 a.m., I showered and dressed like the day had asked me a question I didn't know how to answer. I found a small firm 2 neighborhoods over, 3 partners, mismatched chairs in the lobby, a receptionist who looked like she'd fight a dragon with a stapler. I told attorney number 1, Marta Reyes, everything. She didn't flinch. She asked for the facts the way a medic asks for symptoms, direct, clinical, urgent without theatrics. She took notes with a fountain pen that made a decisive little scratch. First, she said, we secure evidence. Second, we prepare for the company investigation. Third, we anticipate criminal exposure. You're going to want to scream online. Don't. You're going to want to text colleagues. Don't. Facts only, to us. I didn't do this, I said. I heard you, she said, looking me in the eyes long enough for my pulse to finally come down a notch. Now we build it so a stranger can't misunderstand. I handed her the rideshare screenshots, my timeline, the bar's manager contact I'd found at 2 a.m., and a list of names, people who saw me leave through the front. She circled 3. We'll reach out. When I stood to go, she added, one more thing. If this stays internal, we handle it quietly. If it moves, we move with it. Fast. Moves where? Press. Police. Civil court. She capped her pen. People think truth is a light switch. It's a fuse box. We're going to flip every breaker. Outside, the morning had that crisp, post-storm clarity, even though no rain had fallen. I walked past a cafe full of people who didn't know me, didn't care about me, and felt something like relief. Strangers are kinder when they can't imagine your worst headline. My phone buzzed again. An unknown number, we need to talk about Friday night. Tom. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Then I set the phone face down and kept walking. I didn't know it then, but that was the last quiet hour I'd have for a very long time. By noon, the rumor had outgrown our building. A tech blog posted a blind item, mid-tier firm suspends engineer amid harassment probe, insiders say more to come. The comments section was an exorcism of strangers' ghosts. I kept my promise to Marta and said nothing, even when my fingers ached with the effort of not typing. At 4:03 p.m., HR asked me to come in for an interview the next day. Marta would be with me. I stared at the calendar invite for a full minute before I clicked accept. At 6:40 p.m., my doorbell rang. Not polite this time, impatient. I looked through the peephole and saw a face that made my stomach drop, a detective's. Plainclothes, badge on the belt like a punctuation mark. When I opened the door, he kept his expression neutral. Mr. Lake? I'm Detective Rowan. We'd like to ask you a few questions about Friday night. I stepped back to let him in, and as he crossed the threshold, something slewed inside my chest, a slow, grinding pivot from fear into something else. Anger, yes. But below that, an iron filament. A line being drawn. Happy to answer with my attorney present, I said, hearing my voice steady itself like a hand on a railing. He nodded, unreadable. We can arrange that. He handed me a card. The little rectangle felt heavier than it should. Sooner is better. After he left, I stood with my forehead against the cool wood of the door. I breathed. I pictured the fuse box in my head, every switch labeled, every line traced. You don't get to choose the lie that lights your life on fire. You only choose what you do with the flames. I turned on my desk lamp, opened the facts folder, and started building the case that would one day carry my name into a courtroom with 9 black robes. Not to survive. To end this, so thoroughly, so publicly, that no one would ever be able to say maybe again. The internet doesn't sleep. It doesn't pause to ask if something is true. It doesn't weigh facts against fiction. It only knows momentum, and once it gets rolling, it becomes an avalanche. By the next morning, the avalanche had found me. I woke up to 63 unread texts. Friends. Colleagues. Numbers I didn't recognize. The subject line of one email simply said monster. Another said you deserve to burn. I hadn't even brushed my teeth when the first call came from my sister. I could hear the panic in her voice before she said anything. It's online. I opened my laptop with shaking fingers. A blog post. Then a tweet with 1,000 retweets. Then a thread on a gossip forum. My name wasn't even hidden anymore. They'd gone full mask off. Software engineer Aaron Lake suspended amid misconduct allegations. Suspended. Misconduct. Allegations. Words that stick like tar. And there, in the middle of the article, was a blurred photo of Mara leaving the mixer. The caption said she was bravely coming forward. She wasn't blurred. I was. The villain is always obscured in shadow. The comment section was a bonfire. Disgusting. Throw him out of the industry. Typical tech bro. No one asked for proof. No one asked for context. They didn't need to. The accusation was the verdict. My phone rang again. Tom. My manager. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity was louder than self-preservation. Aaron, he said, voice low, like he didn't want anyone to overhear. They're saying it's serious. The company can't be seen protecting you. I have proof, Tom. Rideshare logs. Security footage. Witnesses. He sighed. You need to understand. This isn't about facts. This is about optics. That was when I realized, the truth didn't matter. Not yet. Not here. The company was in survival mode, and I was the perfect sacrifice. By noon, the blog post had been picked up by 3 bigger outlets. By evening, there were hashtags. My inbox was unusable. My phone vibrated so constantly it felt alive in my hand. That night, I tried to go for a walk just to breathe. 2 blocks from my apartment, a man I didn't recognize spat at the sidewalk near my feet and muttered, "Pig." I kept walking. My ears burned hot. Every window felt like an eye. Every laugh from strangers sounded like it had my name inside it. When I got home, I shut the door and leaned against it, chest heaving. My life hadn't just changed. It had detonated. And yet, in the rubble, something sharp was forming. They had the numbers. They had the noise. But I had something better. I had the truth. And I was going to weaponize it. The courthouse steps looked like a stage, and I was the villain walking into the spotlight. Cameras tracked me the second I turned the corner. A dozen lenses, a dozen voices firing questions like bullets. Do you deny the allegations? Have you spoken to Mara? Are you pleading guilty? Guilty. The word stung like they'd already carved it into my skin. Marta walked beside me, her heels clicking like a metronome, her expression hard enough to cut glass. Don't answer. Don't look at them. Eyes forward. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed, and the smell of paper and polish made the air feel heavier. I sat at the defendant's table while Mara's legal team took their places across the aisle. And then she walked in. Mara didn't look scared. She didn't look fragile. She walked with her chin high, her blouse perfectly pressed, her expression carefully constructed for the audience she knew was watching. She glanced at me just once, and for a split second, I saw it, satisfaction. The judge entered. Court is in session. I thought I was ready. I thought the truth was enough. But the ambush started immediately. Mara's lawyer opened with a statement dripping with venom. My client was cornered. Trapped. Subjected to unwanted advances in a place she should have felt safe. This isn't just about harassment. This is about power. About an abuse of trust. Every word painted me as a predator. Every sentence was designed to twist the knife deeper. The jury, their faces already skeptical, shifted further away from me with every phrase. And then they unveiled their evidence. A grainy security camera photo of me leaving the mixer. Alone. At 9:12 p.m. it looked like I was lurking, hunched, shadowed by the poor quality of the footage. They framed it as me stalking the premises. Marta leaned close. Don't react. But I wanted to scream. That was the same timestamp as my rideshare pickup. The same moment that proved I was leaving, not following her. But without the full context, without the app logs, the photo looked damning. Then came the witnesses. One by one, people I'd worked beside for years stepped forward and said just enough to feed her narrative. I saw Aaron talking to Mara that night. He seemed drunk. He was standing close. None of it was illegal. None of it was harassment. But strung together, it built the illusion of a pattern. The ambush worked. I could see it in the jury's eyes, suspicion curdling into certainty. When it was our turn, Marta kept her voice calm, controlled. She promised evidence, promised clarity, promised the facts. But promises don't erase poison once it's spilled. As the judge banged the gavel to adjourn for the day, Mara brushed past me, close enough that only I could hear her whisper. "You won't win." Her perfume lingered like smoke after a fire. Walking out into the swarm of cameras again, I understood something chilling. This wasn't just a trial about me. It was a performance, and she had rehearsed every line. But performances can crack. And I was going to find the moment hers broke wide open. The first week of trial hollowed me out. Every headline was a nail in my coffin. Engineer faces harassment allegations in high-profile case. Victim testifies against colleague in emotional hearing. Company distances itself from suspended employee. The press ate it up, every detail sharpened into a weapon. They described me like a stranger, a mid-level software engineer with a history of late nights and alcohol at company events. Not a brother. Not a friend. Not a man who once built an entire system from scratch. Just a shadowy figure built to fit her story. I stopped answering my phone. Half my friends had gone silent anyway. The other half sent messages that started with "I don't know what to believe, but..." The "but" always burned worse than the silence. One night, I opened my social feeds, stupidly thinking I could handle it. I couldn't. Threads with my face, my name, my resume. People calling me a predator. People saying I should be fired, blacklisted, jailed. People saying worse. I slammed my laptop shut so hard I thought the screen would crack. And then I just sat in the dark for hours. That was the bottom. But here's the thing about bottom: once you hit it, you either stay there, or you push. At 3 a.m., I stood up, turned on the light, and opened the facts folder again. I pulled out every shred of evidence I had: the rideshare receipts, the app location data, the text from Tom, the email chain with the project timeline, the mixer event schedule. I laid it all out across my kitchen table like pieces of a puzzle. Marta's words echoed in my head: truth isn't a light switch. It's a fuse box. So I started connecting circuits. The rideshare receipt lined up with the timestamp on the grainy photo they'd used against me. The building's security logs showed Mara swiping out of the garage 10 minutes after I'd already left. The bartender's receipt, my card, my signature, proved I'd closed my tab before she even walked out. Piece by piece, the story shifted. Not her story, the story. The actual one. The next morning, bleary-eyed but sharper than I'd felt in weeks, I brought it all to Marta. She studied the table, her brow furrowing as she made notes. When she looked up, her mouth twitched like she was fighting a smile. "This is good," she said. "This isn't just defense. This is offense." That was the pivot. That was the moment I stopped being a man accused and started being a man building a case. Because if she wanted war, I wasn't just going to fight. I was going to dismantle her story, piece by piece, until she had nothing left. And when I was done, she wouldn't just lose. She'd choke on the lie she thought would bury me. The courtroom was colder that morning. Not in temperature, in mood. The jury filed in, their expressions unreadable, the way gamblers guard their hands. Mara sat across from me, flawless as ever, pressed blouse, hair smoothed, eyes rehearsed. She looked like someone preparing to win. But I'd come armed. Marta rose when the judge asked if the defense was ready. Her tone was calm, almost casual, as if she were about to ask for a continuance. Instead, she dropped the first domino. "Your Honor, the defense would like to submit Plaintiff's Exhibit 12, the rideshare data logs from the night in question." Mara's lawyer looked up, frowning. "Objection, relevance." The judge raised a brow. "Overruled." "Let's see it." On the screen appeared a map. A blue dot, me. Spring Street, 9:12 p.m. a timestamp, verified by the company. Drop-off at my apartment minutes later. Immutable, undeniable. The jury leaned forward. "This," Marta said, pointing to the screen, "is the exact moment opposing counsel claimed my client was lurking in the parking garage. In reality, he was already en route home, as proven by third-party records." The silence that followed was thick. Mara's lawyer shuffled papers as if he could find an alternate timeline buried between the pages. And then Marta layered it. Piece after piece. The security swipe logs showing Mara entered the garage at 9:22 p.m., 10 minutes after I'd already left. The bar tab receipt, timestamped, signed, with a bartender's note confirming I closed out before she exited. The building's own CCTV stills, me walking out the front, not following anyone, just heading toward the street. Each click of the projector was another blow, another fracture in the story she'd spun so confidently. I watched Mara out of the corner of my eye. At first, she kept her composure. But when the garage swipe logs went up, her name, her timestamp, her alone, something flickered. Just for a second. A tightening of her jaw. A glance at her lawyer. The jury saw it too. Marta finished with a statement that wasn't a shout, but a scalpel. Ladies and gentlemen, the prosecution asks you to believe my client followed the plaintiff into the garage. The evidence shows the opposite, that he was already gone. This isn't just reasonable doubt. This is proof of innocence. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the tide shift. The jury didn't look at me like a predator anymore. They looked at Mara. And what they saw was a crack in her mask. The ambush had been hers in the beginning. But now, the counterattack was mine. And it was only the beginning. The shift was subtle at first. A ripple. But ripples become waves if you keep pushing. After we dropped the evidence bomb, the courtroom's energy changed. Jurors leaned in now, curious instead of hostile. Reporters scribbled faster. Even the judge's tone softened toward the defense. And Mara started to sweat. Not visibly, not enough for headlines, but I noticed. The tiniest tremor when she adjusted her blouse cuffs. The way she avoided my eyes for the first time. That was when Marta whispered to me, "We don't just prove innocence. We prove motive. If we show why she lied, we don't just win, we bury her." So we dug. It started with her emails. During discovery, we'd been given hundreds of them, most of them bland work chatter. But buried inside, we found a thread between Mara and the head of HR dated 2 weeks before the mixer. The subject line, concerns Aaron Lake. I remember staring at the printout, blood pounding in my ears. This was before the night she accused me. Before anything even happened. In the email, Mara wrote that she felt uncomfortable with Aaron's growing influence and that he's positioning himself for a promotion I've been working toward. Promotion. That was the word that turned the whole case. Because 3 weeks after that email, there was a job posting, senior project lead. A role both she and I had been quietly aiming for. A role I was ahead in the running for. Motive. Marta didn't show it in court immediately. She was patient, surgical. She waited until Mara was on the stand again, recounting the same trembling rehearsed story about the garage. And then, mid-cross, Marta slid the printed email across the witness stand. "Do you recognize this?" Mara blinked. Her lawyer objected. The judge allowed it. "It's an email I wrote," she admitted, voice tight. "Dated 2 weeks before the incident you claim took place?" "Yes. And in this email, you state that you were concerned about my client's growing influence. By influence, you meant his candidacy for the senior project lead position, correct?" Mara's throat bobbed. Yes. The jury was watching her like hawks. "So let's be clear," Marta said, her voice razor sharp. "You had concerns about my client receiving the promotion you wanted. You expressed these concerns in writing. And then, days later, you accused him of misconduct. Do you expect this jury to believe that's a coincidence?" Mara's mask cracked. Not shattered, not yet. But enough. Her lawyer scrambled, trying to redirect, but the damage was done. The jurors weren't just questioning my guilt anymore. They were questioning her honesty, and once a jury starts doubting a victim's truthfulness, it spreads like wildfire. That night, the press headlines began to change. Not a lot, but enough to taste. Defense raises questions about motive in high-profile harassment case. Could career ambition play a role in testimony? It wasn't vindication. Not yet. But it was the thread. And once you pull the right thread, the whole fabric starts to unravel. And I was ready to rip every last stitch. The second time Mara took the stand, she walked slower. Not timid, calculated. Like she thought she could buy sympathy with careful steps. She smoothed her skirt, folded her hands, and gave the jury a faint, fragile smile. Her lawyer started soft, asking her to clarify her experience. She spoke with practiced tremors, words quivering just enough to sound believable. I felt trapped. I was scared. I didn't know how to say no. Some jurors nodded. A few even frowned sympathetically. She was good, I'll give her that. She knew how to play the role. But then Marta rose. "Ms. Quinn," she began, calm as still water, "you testified earlier that my client followed you into the garage after 9 p.m., correct?" "Yes." And that you felt unsafe, correct? Yes. Marta lifted a page from her folder. Then can you explain why you sent this email to your manager at 9:19 p.m. while you claimed to have been cornered, asking if the senior project lead posting had closed? The courtroom went silent. Mara blinked, stammered. I don't remember writing that. Shall I read it to you? Marta's tone was sharp now. Hi, just wanted to check if the posting closed tonight or if I still have time to submit updates to my application. Thanks, Mara. She set the paper down. 9:19. The exact time you said you were in the garage, allegedly terrified. A ripple ran through the jury. Mara's lawyer jumped up. Objection. Relevance. Overruled, the judge said flatly. Marta didn't stop there. She stacked the blows. Ms. Quinn, do you also deny that you texted a colleague later that same night, quote, if Aaron's out, this job is mine? Mara froze. Her eyes flicked, just once, toward her lawyer. It was tiny, but the jury caught it. That was taken out of context, she said weakly. Marta pressed. Out of context? Because the timestamp shows it was sent less than an hour after my client left the mixer. Before you even filed your report. Her voice cracked for the first time. I don't remember that night clearly. And there it was, the crack spreading. Marta leaned in just enough for the jury to feel the weight of her words. Ms. Quinn, the truth doesn't change. But your story keeps shifting. Which version should this jury believe? Mara's silence lasted too long. Way too long. The judge had to remind her to answer. But she didn't recover. Not fully. Her once sympathetic posture now looked defensive, brittle. By the time Marta sat down, the jury wasn't nodding at Mara anymore. They were staring at her like she was the one on trial. And in that moment, for the first time, I saw fear in Mara's eyes, not the fake kind she'd performed in the garage. The real kind. The kind that comes when a lie starts to collapse under its own weight. I didn't smile. Not yet. But inside, I knew. We weren't just defending anymore. We were winning. I never thought my name would reach the highest court in the country. But lies have a way of snowballing, and by the time Mara realized her story was collapsing, the case had already become too big to bury. The media frenzy fed on itself. Every headline, every think piece, every late-night talking head turned my trial into a national spectacle. Is the system broken? False accusations versus victim protection. The case that could redefine harassment law. And then, somehow, impossibly, it was accepted for review by the Supreme Court. I'll never forget the morning Marta called me. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the current of excitement under it. They've granted cert, she said. We're going to D.C. The words didn't land at first. I was standing in my kitchen, pouring stale coffee, wearing the same hoodie I'd slept in. And suddenly, the 9 robed justices, the names I'd only seen in textbooks, were going to hear my case. The day we arrived in Washington felt unreal. The marble steps stretched like something out of myth, tourists snapping photos just feet away from the place where my entire future would be decided. Marta walked beside me, heels echoing, expression razor sharp. She was born for this stage. Inside, the chamber felt colder than any courtroom I'd ever been in. The ceiling soared, the hush almost holy. When the clerk called the case, my stomach twisted so hard I thought I might be sick. And then the questions began. One justice leaned forward, voice like a hammer. Counsel, if the evidence shows the accusation was false, what safeguards exist to protect the falsely accused? Another pressed the other side. If we rule in his favor, do we risk discouraging real victims from coming forward? It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about precedent. About law. About the balance of power between accusation and proof. Mara was there, of course, seated with her legal team. But she wasn't the composed actress from the lower court. Not anymore. She looked smaller here, swallowed by the grandeur of the chamber, her lies too flimsy to fill the space. When Marta rose to argue, her voice carried like steel wrapped in silk. She laid out every fact, every inconsistency, every motive. She painted the picture not just of my innocence, but of Mara's deliberate weaponization of the system. And for the first time in this entire nightmare, I didn't just feel like a defendant. I felt like a man standing on the edge of history. Because whatever happened here, this wasn't just my fight anymore. It was everyone's. And I swore, sitting in that marble temple of justice, that if I won, Mara wouldn't just lose me. She'd lose the world. The decision day felt like waiting for a storm you can't see but can feel in your bones. I sat on the courthouse steps in D.C., The marble cooled beneath me, a crowd buzzing around like a hive. Reporters, protesters, law students, strangers clutching signs on both sides, believed survivors across from due process for all. My case had split the country in two. When the clerk walked out with the stack of opinions, the noise died instantly. The paper he held was about to decide not just my life, but the law itself. We filed back inside, silence hanging thick. The Chief Justice began to read. The words were clinical at first, references to precedent, procedural fairness, statutory interpretation. But then came the line that will be etched into me forever. The court finds in favor of the petitioner, Mr. Aaron Lake. The air left my lungs. My ears rang. They didn't just rule for me. They ruled broadly. The decision laid out clear protections for the falsely accused, mechanisms to penalize knowingly false accusers, and language that shifted the national conversation. For months, I'd been a caricature. A villain. A hashtag. Now, in the highest court of the land, the truth was engraved in history. The chamber erupted, reporters scrambling, pens flying. Outside, the crowd split into cheers and shouts, the clash of voices echoing off the marble. Mara sat stone-faced at her table, her mask finally shattered. Her lawyer leaned toward her, whispering frantically, but she didn't move. She just stared down at her hands, as if the words on the page had burned them. When I stepped outside, microphones swarmed, cameras flashing like 1,000 tiny explosions. For the first time, I didn't flinch. I stood tall. All I ever wanted, I said into the storm, was the truth. Today, I got it. That night, every channel carried it. Supreme Court rules in landmark false accusation case. Lake v. Quinn decision reshapes workplace law. From accused to vindicated, man wins at nation's highest court. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I wasn't a monster. I was a man who had fought, and won, in the one place lies couldn't survive. But the victory wasn't just about my name. It was about hers, too, and how it would never recover. Vindication doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with silence. For the first time in a year, my phone wasn't buzzing with accusations, threats, or headlines twisting my life into a circus. Instead, it was buzzing with apologies. Old friends. Colleagues. Even family members who had distanced themselves. Every message sounded the same: I'm sorry. I should have believed you. But apologies don't erase scars. They just prove who carved them. Mara, meanwhile, faced a different kind of silence. The kind that suffocates. The Supreme Court ruling had made her name public. No more Jane Doe, no more anonymity. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was a liar, immortalized in federal precedent. Her employer cut ties within 48 hours. Every social profile locked. Every press request declined. Recruiters stopped calling. She had wanted a promotion, and now she couldn't even get an interview. The ruling had teeth. The court didn't just clear me, it established penalties for knowingly false accusations. Fines. Civil liability. Legal consequences. And Mara, backed into a corner, was suddenly facing all three. Reporters dug into her motives like vultures. The leaked emails. The texts about the promotion. The inconsistencies in her testimony. The headlines that once painted her as brave now called her calculating, vindictive, the face of false allegations. She couldn't go to a coffee shop without whispers. Couldn't open her inbox without venom. Couldn't escape the truth she'd once weaponized against me. And me? I walked free. Not just legally, truly free. I rebuilt my career. Offers poured in, not just from companies but from speaking circuits, advocacy groups, law schools that wanted me to tell my story. I launched my own firm, dedicated to defending those crushed under false accusations. Every client who walked through my doors reminded me why I'd fought, why I'd clawed my way through hell instead of disappearing. The night I signed the lease on my new office, I poured a glass of bourbon and stood by the window. The city hummed below, indifferent, alive. And for the first time, I felt taller than the noise. She had tried to erase me. Instead, she erased herself. And every time someone Googled her name, every time they read the decision in Lake v. Quinn, every time her lie was held up as the reason truth must always matter, she would remember. I didn't just survive her. I won. And I would keep winning, while her name rotted in the shadow of mine.